Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. We've made it through another week, and I received my first COVID vaccination this morning. Feeling great, and already excited about the second. But a big hello to everyone joining me here on Behance. If you are tuning in on Twitter, hello as well. I won't be able to see your chat. If you want to chat along, head on over to behance.net/Adobe Live. We've got Umacorn and Musa from South Africa. And we've got someone from Uzbekistan, and Chris and Brett from Hamilton, Cody, Laura, Chris, Anita, and Wade. Great to see all of you. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday and excited for the weekend. I'm ready to get the weekend started already. All right, let's go ahead and hop over to my screen. And as Cody just posted in the chat, this is my Twitter. Definitely go ahead and follow me. But the reason I'm here is I just posted a preview of what we're going to be building out today. So last week, we started the process of building out a Behance page for our masterclasses, because at the moment, we don't have one dedicated to all the content that we produce on a weekly basis. All the Evangelist live stream every single Friday for, in total, about 5 hours each day, which is amazing, right? So we have a lot of content, and we want eventually a place that we can put all of this content, search through it, organize, and that sort of thing. But we also need a video page, which many of you are watching on right now. So we're going to recreate this page. It's not going to be anything groundbreaking, probably not anything new, but we're going to go a little bit dark today. We're going to do dark mode, mainly because I was tweaking around the landing page that we built last week, and I think maybe we'll do it next week or the week after. We're off next week. We might go dark mode for that specific landing page, just because it feels a little bit more elegant. And our masterclasses, they're a bit fancier, right? Maybe. Not to say that everything else isn't fancy, but they're fun, right? I'm a little bit biased. So here is what we're going to be building out today. So let's go ahead and hop over to Adobe XD. Someone's saying, can you call him? Oh, I don't know if I can pronounce that. Let's see. Kuvanchbek, maybe, possibly. I probably butchered it. I apologize, but maybe I can call you like Kuv. Does that work? Maybe? I don't know. I'm sorry. All right, so here's what we built out last week. We started the process of building out this page. And like I mentioned, I have been exploring what a dark mode version of this particular page could look like. We'll maybe touch on that in a future class, but we built out these categories at the top. You know, all of us touch on a different category. So Paul mainly focuses on design, which is Photoshop and Illustrator, Terry, photography and Photoshop as well, Jason, audio video, me, UI and UX, and then Kyle, illustration, which includes fine art as well. He's fantastic. So we built that out, and inside of here, we also have our overlay components. So if I go ahead and preview this, you can see we can hover over each of these categories and they light up really nicely. We've got our search area and header at the top over here, latest Adobe Masterclasses, and then each section is broken out by the various categories. So again, design, photography, audio, video, XD, and illustration. And these are in order of the times in which they air on every Friday, right? Paul, Terry, Jason, me, and Kyle. So what we want to do today is build out that video page. So when someone does go to this particular Adobe Masterclasses page, if there is a masterclass going on like there is right now, it would automatically show that video instead of everything here. So what we're going to do is we are going to get started. I'm going to grab the Artboard tool shortcut key A, and I'm going to choose the 1920 by 1080 preset. I'm going to name this video, and we're going to get going. Now, I mentioned, even though this particular page on the left is a light version, I do want to go dark, because eventually this page over here may mold to a darker experience, or ideally, it would change based on the user's preference, if they like light mode, dark mode, that sort of thing. So I'm going to start by just setting the fill of this particular artboard to a nice dark color. Now, on this artboard here, we do have this navigation bar at the top, but you're going to notice if I copy it, head on over here and paste it, a lot of it's hard to see. You know, of course, my little avatar Look how cute that is, that little Howard toy face. Of course, that's easy to see, but everything else, not so easy. So I'm gonna simply dive in here very quickly, and we're gonna just change the color of some of these things. And I could go ahead and actually select these two groups, change these all to white at the same time. Maybe I'll select this bar at the bottom, and maybe I'll change that to the Behance blue, which I think I have saved. I do have saved right there. And this break underneath, I'm gonna go a little bit darker, so it's a nice subtle break. And then over here to the right, we do have some more elements. Again, we can't see them very well, but I'm gonna select them. There we go, and change them to white. Now, these are components, so these are instances, as you can tell at the top left-hand corner, and now there's a dot in the center. And that means that it has been overridden. So if I do undo this, actually, you're gonna notice now, there's no dot, because that is not, it's just an instance. But if I were to go back, we now have the dot. But it still remains linked back to the original. So if I had to change the structure of this particular envelope, in this case, or icon, then it's still gonna push those changes if I do edit the main component right over here. All right. And by the way, me designing a page, a dark mode page on Behance, not a hint at anything. I don't believe dark mode is in the works. I know the team wants to get to it, but we have bigger things to tackle. So no dark mode at the moment, unless there's some secret team on the XD side that's working on it that's just not telling me because they know I might spill the beans. But as far as I know, dark mode is not actively in development. All right. It would be great if YouTube translated in real time. I think it's beta. Yeah, that would be great. Unfortunately, we don't have any control over that, the YouTube captions, but I completely agree. That would be wonderful. I would imagine that's probably difficult, but I did hear it's in beta as well. All right, so now at the top, as you all can probably see right now, there's a nice large video, and that's kind of what we want to go for. So I'm going to grab the rectangle tool and drag one out. Now, what we're going to do is, over on the right-hand side, there is going to be the chat pod, which many of you are chatting in right now. Do you follow any rules to spacing content? I do typically use the 8-pixel grid. I did just make a video on how to do that in Adobe XD. But during these live streams, I typically don't. But you might see me try to space things out like 8, 16, 24, 32 pixels. But sometimes I'll also, if you want, you can go to your layout grid. But during these live streams, I typically don't. All right, so now this is going to be a video for this particular page, right? So what we want to make sure to do is make sure that the aspect ratio is 16:9. Is Behance a subsidiary of Adobe? Yeah, so Behance, hey Rob, great to see you. Behance is part of Adobe, and it didn't used to be, but many, many years ago, I don't remember when, but we did purchase Behance, and we've been evolving it ever since. So I'm gonna go ahead in the Properties Inspector, 1280 by 720. And now that I know it is a 16:9 ratio, I can go ahead and make this a little bit larger if I want to. Again, I wanna make sure that we have a nice amount of room on the left-hand side for our chat. All right, so we have our video placeholder now in place, and I'm gonna hop over to Finder, and I do have this image. It's simply a screenshot of one of my newest videos that is available, actually the newest video on YouTube. I'm gonna drag this directly into the shape, and that looks pretty good right there. Now, over top of this particular video, and this could be maybe when it's not being played, there might be a play button, and there may also be some controls at the bottom. Now, we're not gonna spend too much time creating the controls, but if any of you hover over the YouTube video right now, or you pause it, don't pause it. Just maybe try that later. But if you do pause the YouTube video, typically it kind of goes dark a little bit, and there's maybe a gradient at the bottom so you can see the controls. So what you can do in that case is, with the rectangle one more time, you can drag out a shape. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna set the fill to a linear gradient. Now, of course, if you want the entire thing to go dark, you can either drop the opacity of this image or add an overlay on top of it and just set a solid color of black, right? Are all images stock photos? Yes, most of the images that I use in my videos and my live streams are stock photos. And that's just, wanna make sure that our licensing is all up to par, right? I don't want to get in trouble with any artist I want to make sure that everything is licensed properly. Can you please talk about good grouping practices? I'll try to talk about that as I go, but in general, if you have things that are common or belong together, like this navigation bar, for example, all these elements up here belong in this navigation bar, right? So I grouped it as navigation or nav or whatever. And then inside there are these subgroups. So we have our links, which is also a group. And what's nice about this is when you place something into a group or a component, you can turn on a stack within the properties inspector, right? And that will allow me to dive in here, grab these elements, and just shift them around as needed. So that's a big benefit of using groups. And you can also put a stack on this overall group. Now, I'm not going to right now because I have these other elements that I haven't paid attention to. If I were to place it into a stack, actually, let's see what happens. Okay, yeah, so those little elements, because I didn't place them properly, messed it up a little bit, but you can create another stack inside of there. And if you take a look on this design, we have our sections group right here. And in this group, it contains the Photoshop, photo, audio, UI, and illustration, and a stack is turned on here. And the big benefit of that is I can dive in. Let's say maybe Terry takes over Paul's spot. I can just jump in here, grab this group, and swap it. Just like that, right? It's pretty fancy. So that's another benefit of groups, but you have to make sure things are grouped properly. And as we go, I'll definitely talk more about that. Can you suggest purchase Envato elements? I have not used that personally, so I cannot vouch for it. All right, I am getting off track. So we have our overlay, which I'm going to name overlay, and I'm going to drop the opacity a little bit so it's just not too dark, but it's dark enough that if there are any elements on top of this overlay, that we'll be able to see it. Because if we don't have this overlay and we have something like a play button, let me very quickly create that. Right, we have our little play button. Let's rotate it around. Maybe we'll round out the corners a little bit. Doesn't really matter, right? As you can see, it's a white play button on top of a fairly light background. And the thing with video is every frame is going to be different. So you can't really predict what it's going to look like. So some frames of the video might be white, some might be black, some might be blue and red. So you can't really create one play button that is going to look good against all those colors. Just not possible. So what we do instead is we add things like overlays, right? So no matter what color is back there on the video, because there's this dark overlay, we can safely put a light button or icon on top of it, right? So we have that nice contrast. Now, again, we're not going to do the controls at the bottom, but I will be adding a play button up here, so I'm going to just move it up there. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, in terms of that play button, we do have this button here, right? But again, the frames in the back are different. So like I mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and drop the opacity of the overall video. It kind of takes away from the beautiful colors in some of these frames, right? So what we can do instead is we can create a background or a container for this icon. So I'm going to grab the ellipse tool, shortcut key E, drag one out. And let's go ahead and set this to our nice Behance blue. And we may want a little bit of a border. Now you can add the border on the inside, the outside. This is very Behance-esque, right? So it looks pretty good. Outside, inside, completely depends. Now, of course, if you do want a little bit of style, you can drop the opacity a little bit, but I'm gonna add it, I'll just keep it on the inside, and then maybe we'll add a little bit of a shadow, just in case there are elements back there that it might clash with, right? So I'm gonna bump it down, or I guess up on the Y-axis, and I'm doing that right down here at the bottom of the Properties Inspector, and then I'm gonna blur it quite a bit so we have a nice, subtle button. And it'll make sure it's behind our polygon. And like I stress in every single masterclass, when you're designing zoomed in like this, like I do all the time, I'm gonna press the play button. Okay, it's a little bit large, I think. That's a big button. So I'm simply gonna select both of these. I'm gonna pop them into a group. I'll call this play. I can also turn this into a component as well if I'm gonna be using this across multiple artboards, which I probably will, right? And that's looking a little bit better. Now I'm gonna make sure that this play button is centered with this video. Now, One thing you probably don't want to do in this case is use your alignment options at the top. If I were to align it to the center, because no other object is selected, it's going to align that button to the center of our artboard, right? Now, because this video is not centered in the artboard, it's kind of floating off into space, right? So instead, what we want to do is select the button, which is selected right now, and also the video in the back, or the frame in the back. So I'm going to hold down Shift and click on it. And now if I go ahead and press the align center, and let's say the align center, line middle, I guess I should say, it's going to make sure to align the object on the top with the center and the middle of the object in the back. All right, that looks pretty good. I can group all these elements. I'll call this video, and we are good to go. All right, before we get into the fun stuff of the chat over to the right, I do have a question here. Can you tell me how I can make a component inside an existing component and the second component be the, you said master, it's called the main component now of itself. So you can't. And that is by design. That used to be the case. If you were to create a component inside of a larger component, you could have that main component of that secondary component inside a larger main component. That was incredibly confusing to designers, and it made it difficult to find main components. It made it difficult to update. It just made it very confusing. So you can't do that anymore, and that is very much by design. And I think it was a good decision. It's a little bit confusing at first, but it is a good decision. All right, down here we may want some metadata of this video. First up is the title. So I'm going to grab the text tool, shortcut key T, and in this case, this is the 8-pixel nudges in Adobe XD. This is the title of the video, and this is square grid, right? And in this case, I'm just running with a video title. Of course, in that, in the Masterclass's case, it would be the title of the Masterclass, which I do a terrible job at naming my Masterclasses. As you can tell by this one, Adobe XD Masterclass, what is this, 47. Very descriptive, isn't it? I should probably do a better job with that. All right, so let's take a look at that. 32 pixels looks okay. It might be a little bit large, but it's hard to tell, right? So we'll go down to 24. And I'm going to pop it in this area here. Now, I don't have any guides on this particular page at the moment. Now, let's check this one. Do I have any on here? I do. So I have some guides on this artboard, but I do not have any guides on this artboard because I did not copy this artboard from this one. But what I can do is select the entire artboard, and then under the View menu, go down to Guides, and then Copy Guides, and then paste, just like that. And that'll just allow me to line some of these elements up a little bit better. And then what we might want to do is create a description of this video right down below the title. Now, instead of simply clicking, which will create a point text, we'll want to click and drag to define the width. Because in a moment, we're going to have some icons over to the right, and we probably don't want the text to go all the way over to the right-hand side of this video. It would just be way too long. So I'm going to click and drag. Let's go about there, right? Now, I do have some copy on my other monitor that I'm simply going to grab and paste it right in there. Beautiful. Now, this is the description of this particular video, right? And we probably don't want the text, the style to match the title, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to drop this to, let's say, regular, and maybe we'll drop it in size a little bit as well. There we go. That's looking a little better. I might want to bump up the text just a touch. Let's try 26. Something in that range there, right? And of course I can move this inwards if I needed to. Adjust the line height. All right. Perfect. Anita says, I actually like the titles of the XD class because the episode numbers are easy to follow. Interesting. That's a good point. But what I probably should do is start it off, Adobe XD Masterclass 47, and then if I do know what I'm going to be designing that day, then add in something else afterwards. Possibly. I'll get better at that, I promise. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now, as I'm going through and adding these text layers, I definitely want to hop into my assets. I'm going to select both of these and just add them as character styles. Just in case I have multiple artboards using this exact same style and I need to make changes, I can easily do that just once directly in here by right-clicking and pressing edit, And I can change this to Comic Sans, which is a wonderful typeface. No? Okay. I'm sorry. All right. Are you comfortable talking a little bit about your design education? Sure. Very quickly, I'll just kind of run through the TLDR of it. I started designing when I was very young. I started dabbling in Photoshop. I remember using an outdated version of Photoshop with no layers, Photoshop 2.5. And that got me very interested in design throughout end of elementary and throughout high school. I did go to college for 3D design and animation. I did not finish due to personal reasons, but and that's kind of when I pivoted and started teaching Photoshop. But I don't have much in terms of an actual design education. A lot of it's self-taught, and yeah, so it's probably not a very exciting answer. It's probably not what you wanted to hear, but anyone who's doubting themselves that they can't teach themselves something, or with things like Masterclasses or all the other resources. Gosh, I wish I had all these resources when I was trying to learn Photoshop and Illustrator and all these things back in the day, but you guys have it good. You have it really good. All right, so now over here we might want some buttons, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the ellipse, drag one out, right about there, and this button over here to the right is going to help us collapse our chat or expand the video, whichever way you want to look at it. So we're going to make a fairly subtle button, and I'm going to add a little bit of a border. Now, of course, the main part of this button is going to be an arrow, right? So your experience in Adobe XD, I started using XD when it was in beta, Project Comet. So I've been using it for forever, as long as it's been publicly available. So I would imagine I'm pretty good with it. Of course, I learn things all the time. I do. All right, so I'm going to round this out a little bit. Actually, what I may want to do is actually add a little bit of a stem. So I'm going to grab the rectangle, draw one out. I'm going to round out the corners just like I did with this shape. And to make my life a little bit easier, I can actually combine these shapes. So I'm going to select both of them. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click. And then at the top right-hand corner, we have our Boolean options. And the first one is add. There we go. That's the perfect answer, actually. I'm teaching myself. I used to be an Android developer and quit to pursue design. Yeah, there is definitely hope for you. Absolutely. A lot of people in our chat and our community are completely self-taught, mainly because I don't want to get too much into the weeds of the schooling system. I'm not sure where you're from, but here in the United States, schooling is ridiculously expensive. Ridiculously. And then at the end of it, you're not even guaranteed a job, right? I know people, including family members, who spent $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 to go to school, and they never even step foot in that job ever, right? So it's crazy. So if you can teach yourself, even to start, just to kind of figure out if that's what exactly you want to do, that's a wonderful way to learn. And again, we have so many resources, not just us as Adobe, but on YouTube and all these other, Skillshare, LinkedIn Learning, a lot of places. So definitely recommend exploring everything that you can. All right, I don't want to spend too much time on this button, but that's looking okay. I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to call this collapse. And then over to the left of this, let's try 16 pixels. All right, this is where it shows on Behance what application this is being used for. Now I don't have an XD, actually maybe I do have an XD icon. Let's check my libraries. Dun 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 dun. I know I have XD assets. Do I have one in here? I do not have one there. I know I have one somewhere. Aha, I found one. And it's even the updated one. All right, so I'm gonna drag this one in. It's a large icon, isn't it? Phew. That's better. Perfect. All right, so we've got that looking pretty good, and I'm gonna call this application. And then over on this side here, we want maybe a share icon. So of course you can grab an icon from your icon managers, your third-party icon sets, or you can hop into your plugins. I do have the Icons for Design plugin installed. Let's try share and let's see what we can find. The Feather is always a good resource. Feather makes some amazing open source icons. They're just wonderful, aren't they? Make that a little bit smaller, probably even more smaller. Yeah, I want that nice small icon. It is border based, so I'm going to drop this, let's say to 2. And I can even dive in here and make some changes to the actual icon if I wanted to. Because again, it's all border based, it's all vector. Beautiful. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's see. You can use Pathfinder to unite the parts of the arrow. And yeah, I think I did it, right? Yes, I did. So it's called a union in XD. Illustrator, of course, it's a Pathfinder, but yeah. Let's see, what else do we got? A lot of people talking about how they are self-taught as well. Yeah, there's a lot of amazing resources these days. And finally, over here, this is going to be the Appreciate icon, right? So this one's a little bit different. If you take a look at your page right now, you might notice that this icon is blue. So it's going to be the Behance blue. And there is a thumb icon that actually grabbed from Behance earlier that I'm going to come in here and paste it. I stole Behance's icons, I'm sorry. There we go. Beautiful. All right. The icons are now complete, and this is going to be called Appreciate. And this one is going to be Share, and the rest, I believe, are named properly. All right. Now, I'm going to also group some of these, and this goes back to the question earlier about grouping, because these are all, this one looks visually, because there's a bit of a shadow, so I'm going to bump it down a touch. So these are all, like icons. You can also turn them into components as well. So I'm going to group these and call this buttons or actions maybe. And again, I can turn a stack on within the properties inspector. That way, if we decide to, the collapse icon would probably always be there, but maybe we want to swap the position of the XD icon or the application icon and share. I could just, whoops, I selected both of them. Whew, boop. There we go, right? Fancy. Remind me the name of the website for the avatar. So I believe you're talking about, do I have them here? I haven't gotten them yet, but they are toy faces. Cody will probably put a link in the chat, but I will be getting to those in just a minute. And let me go into, I'm jumping the gun a little bit. I went into the plugins panel looking for toy faces. Not yet. You didn't hear that from me. All right, so toy faces, and yeah, so here I have a library of toy faces. There we go, and I'll be getting to these in a second, and maybe Cody will put a link in the chat. All right, so speaking of chat, what we're going to do is we're going to build out the chat experience over here on the right-hand side. So now I might want the chat pod to kind of separate it from the rest of the design. I might want it to stand out a little bit more, or have a slightly different color. So I'm going to grab the rectangle, drag one out, and for this one, we could go the pure black, but I might want to introduce a little bit of color. Just bump it up a touch, right? And then that's not bad, right about there. Very subtle, right? Now, what you might be noticing is we originally had these icons right to the edge of this video. But because we have the chat pod now to the edge of the video, we probably don't want that. We want some nice breathing room or spacing, like someone in the chat just mentioned. Do you follow spacing, text, etc., 8-point versus 12-point, so on and so forth? I typically do, only because I know a lot of people who watch are trying to figure that out themselves. I typically follow the 8-point grid or 8 pixel grid, only because I know that a lot of the screens that I design for can be divisible by 8. And that's typically why a lot of designers and developers prefer that. But almost none of my stuff that I design is being handed off to a developer. So when I'm designing by myself, I typically don't think about it too much, but sometimes naturally I just go for the 8 pixel grid. All right. So this is looking pretty good. Because we have that line break at the top, you can kind of see it there. I'm going to ignore that. No one saw that, right? All right, so now down here we want 2 icons, as you can probably see on the chat, is right above there's a subscribe icon. If you're not subscribed yet, definitely do that. And a Creative Cloud icon to let you know if we're live or not. So for the buttons, super simple. We're going to drag out a rectangle. I'm not too concerned about the size at the moment. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to go to my assets, grab my blue, view round to the corners, and we'll type out subscribe. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And this is a main call to action, so I'm going to bold it. Now, typically, maybe, depends on the situation, you might want to center align this text layer, right? Now, in this case, because this button is going to be more or less anchored over to the right-hand side of this page or chat pod, I'm going to make this a bit smaller. It's a little bit too large. I'm actually going to right align this text. And the big benefit of that is that if I select both of these layers here, and I either put them into a group, or I turn it into a component, just like this up here, Bruce is asking, do certain actions bring up stack options? So groups and components, you can enable stack on. If you have just random objects selected, you cannot enable a stack. So groups and components. All right. So I've gone ahead and created this button, right? And because I went ahead and right align this text, if I turn on padding within the properties inspector right over here, and I'm going to, let's bump it down to 16 so it's nice and even. And now I dive in here and write hello, it's going to automatically resize, but from the right or the left, it depends on how you look at this, right? But it's going to stay anchored to that right-hand side. But I do want it to say subscribe. I'm going to move it over a little bit. 44, let's go for 40 pixels. So we're sticking with that 8 pixel grid. There we go. And by the way, like I showed in my video, if you go to your artboard and go into the properties inspector, you can turn on your square grid and you can set, let's say, an 8 pixel grid, right? And now what you're going to notice is it's snapped over to the right-hand side of this grid. If I hold down Shift and press the left arrow key, oh, it's snapping on the other side. There we go. So on the left, you're going to notice it's snapping to that grid. So it's jumping by 8 pixels instead of 10. So you can override the default of 10 just by enabling the grid within your artboard settings. And if you don't want to see it, but you still want it to be active, you can simply just grab the opacity and drag it down. So now it's still there, and it's still going to jump your layers by 8 pixels instead of 10. And you'll notice if I jump this to, like, let's say 25 or 24, and I snap it, and then look at that. Now it's jumping 24 pixels. Fancy, right? All right, but I don't want that. Beautiful. Now, over to the left, we want the Creative Cloud icon. So I'm going to grab let's grab a rectangle, just in case we want to change the rounded corners at some point. Another question about the 8 pixel grid. Why is it 8 versus 10? So a lot of it comes down to personal preference between you and your developers. And like I mentioned, a lot of developers like to use the 8 pixel grid because many of the screens, like our iPhone screens and many of the devices that we have, the resolution is divisible by 8. And not always the case, it's not always divisible by 10. So a lot of people kind of go in the direction of an 8 pixel grid versus 10. But some developers and designers prefer just 10. They don't really care about those 2 extra pixels. But if you really want to be pixel perfect, depending on the device you're designing for, you may want 8 pixels. But, completely up to you. All right, now behind this, we may want a little bit of a border. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to turn on a border. Let's go 2 pixels. Maybe not so red. Drop that a touch. And then, whoop. Now because this is a rectangle or a square converted into a circle, I'll have to make sure to view. There we go. Now on top of this, we're going to want a little bit of a badge. I'm going to sample this red. Maybe I'll round out the corners just a little bit. And then in the middle, I'm going to type out live. Now, I'm not too concerned about this background, this little container changing as I'm designing. So I'm going to leave it as is. Whoops. It's a little large still. I'm going to drop it a touch more. That could potentially work. Maybe I'll bump it up to extra bold. Because why not, right? Beautiful. All right. I'm going to make sure to select these, group them, and call this live. And then over to the right of this, we're going to want just a little bit of more information. And let's say Adobe Live. This I want to left align And then below here, we have a little bit of a pin and also San Jose. It's kind of where we're based out of. California. This is secondary information, so I might want to just drop this to maybe regular. I probably don't want to go much lower than 12 pixels. I would also argue that maybe we can bump this up to 14. This one we can possibly keep at 12. And then I'm going to want one more icon. Let's say a pin. So there's a feather icon. That's interesting, but it's because it'll be so small, I probably don't want a border-based icon. You know, if you're working with border-based icons, you've probably noticed that as they get smaller and smaller, it's a little bit difficult to see. So in this case, I'm probably going to go for a simple. It does it again. I don't know why I don't know why this plugin does it sometimes. I love this plugin, but sometimes it takes my layers and just throws them all the way up there. Yeah, so I want to go for a simple, solid icon. I'll change this to white, or a gray will also work as well. It's a little bit small, actually. Maybe let's bump it up a touch more. Boop, boop. All right, that should look a little bit better. It does. Okay, so this subscribe button is 40 pixels from the right-hand side of this artboard. And I'm going to also make sure that this is 40 pixels as well. So right now it's 56 and 46. I did turn off my grid, so it's not snapping to 8, but there we go. All right, perfect. Now down below this, we're going to have a very simple break. So with the line tool, phew, drag one out. You can either do, actually, let's probably drag it out across the entire container. And we don't really want to, pull too much attention to this, so we're going to keep it nice and subtle. And we're going to have 2 of them. And then inside of here, like some of you might be able to see inside of your chat pod right now, we just have 3 options, right? So we have our chat, and this changes based on what content is actually playing. Let's go for extra bold, see what that looks like. Maybe we'll try the blue. I don't know if the blue's going to work, but we'll try. Maybe that could work. And then over here to the right, we might want info. Now this is not the selected one, so we're going to change this to white. And then maybe something like more from Howard. So maybe when I'm streaming, there'll be a panel on the right that you'll be able to see more information about me. I'm going to group these and call these chat links or sidebar links, whatever you want, and then turn a stack on as well. Again, I can just now swap these around. Or if I go into info and infer, right, the one on the right pushes really nicely over. All right. Perfect. I'm going to group these and call this chat links. All right, so now we come to the fun stuff. We're gonna start building out the chat experience. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start with the avatar, and this goes back to what Rob was asking about earlier. I'm gonna grab the ellipse, drag one out. It looks a little big, but I'm gonna just drop it a little bit. And we're gonna get to the actual photo in a second. I'm gonna name this avatar. And then over to the right, we want 3 bits of information. The name of the person. I'm going to be pulling some names. Today's your birthday. Happy birthday. I'm going to be pulling some names from the chat, so you better be ready. And also, we might want some chat. And then also at the far right-hand side, I don't know if you all can see that, but I can definitely see 3 little dots so that we can access like moderation tools, block people. I can block all of you. I can do it. I'm watching you right now. Yeah, Umacorn's referencing the one I did with Val. That was fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. That's what I do when I'm bored. I just do things like that. All right, so this one, we're gonna grab the text tool, and the first person that I see is Umacorn. There we go. Yeah, I spelled that correctly. Okay. Size-wise, I think it's a little large. I'm going to drop it a touch. Extra bold might be a bit too much, so I'm going to drop it to bold. And then right below, we might want the chat message. Now, this one is, we definitely want to set a width on this. So I'm going to drag this across. I'm going to leave it right around here because, again, there are going to be those 3 dots on the right-hand side. So I'll just drag it there. And for now, I'll just type out this is a chat message, right? Something like that. And we might want to set this to regular so it's a little bit easier to see. I think the size is okay. I think having the name and the chat size, the same size, is probably okay. It's time for some repeat grid. Possibly. I think we, no, we are not going to be using repeat grid. I know, right? And I'll tell you why in a moment. So we have the name, we have the chat, and then over to the right, actually we're going to be using repeat grid, but not for what you think. I'm going to draw out a little dot, and then for here, Command or Control R, or hit the repeat grid button at the top, and all together now, boop. Did you see that? There's like this fun little animation if you hover over. Oh, because I think I went away so it doesn't come back. But they should put a little boop in there. That'd be fun. All right, so I'm going to drag out 2 more dots. View. Boop. That could work. I think those dots are a little bit too large, but that's okay. We're going to run with it. I'm going to make sure they're actually aligned to the top of this particular section. And I'm doing that because the chat messages may be different sizes. So it wouldn't make sense to align it to the middle of the content right now because that content may change. All right, so I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to group it and call this chat. Now, there are a few things we can do in this case. Like I mentioned, we're not going to be using a repeat grid for these chat messages, and that's because some of them will be larger than others, and using a stack is going to be much easier. But to help us kind of get to that direction where we can have something that we can easily duplicate and also easily update like a repeat grid, we're going to be using a component. Now, first of all, I want to go ahead and hop over to my Toy Faces library, and let's just I'm going to put some pretty generic ones in here. So Umacorn is now this very bronze looking toy face, which looks wonderful. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to convert this into a component. So right click, make component, or directly within the properties inspector. And this is going to be our main component as indicated by the diamond at the top left-hand corner. You could use a repeat grid, ungroup it, then turn it into a state. You absolutely could, but yeah, I mean, you could do that, but I want to show you a different way as well. Now, what we want to do here is, the avatar is always going to remain at the top in this particular case. So I'm not too worried about creating a invisible background and messing around with things. But what I'm going to do is take this chat, put it into a larger group. So Command and Control G. Did I get it? I think I missed something. What happened? I think I froze. Hello? I froze. What is going on? My computer is locking up. I can't zoom. Oh, there we go. Oh no. Okay, give it a second. My computer is doing some weird things. Yeah, my other windows froze too. Hopefully you can all still see me, but things are freezing. Let me go ahead and I'm going to force quit a few things. All right. Here we go. Where were we? I think we're going to be back in action. I hope. My computer's doing strange things. Alrighty, so here we go. Good thing we have a cloud document. It just saved by itself. So we have our chat message, and then Command or Control G to pop it into a group. And I'm going to call this messages inside of the layers panel. And now I'm going to turn a stack on. Now, because we only have one layer, or in this case a group, inside of this larger group, it defined it as a horizontal stack, and that's the default when there's only one object inside of it. I want to define it as a vertical stack. And now I can dive in here, select this particular component, Command and Control G to duplicate, and again, and again, and again, right? I can keep going. So it's kind of a repeat grid in that sense. And I can also hover in between some of these messages, hold down Shift, and adjust the spacing. So let's try 24 pixels. I think that could potentially work. And let's go ahead and dive in, and let's say, who else do we have in here? We have Bruce. Bruce. There we go. So Bruce, and we've got Cody. I'm just gonna throw some names in here. Reverb Mike. Oh, so what you're noticing is as I was changing this one, it also changed here. And you might be wondering, what's happening there? So I don't know if this is, I don't know. I've asked the team about this. I don't know if I heard an answer, but right now when you're in a stack, let me actually undo this. So I have this main component selected. Command and Control D to duplicate. what you're noticing is it put the new object on top. So the main component actually got bumped down to the bottom. And if I were to continue doing that, the main component would remain on the bottom. Now, I don't know if that's by design or it's a bug or I don't know. I'll find an answer. But just keep that in mind, right? So let's go back, Bruce. And that's why when I made the change on that last one, which was the main component, it pushed the changes to all the other ones that I did not make any changes. So Cody, and what was the other one that I had in there? I do see Lori in there, so I'm going to put Lori. All right, 24, perfect. And now I can dive in, go back to my toy faces, and let's just add some colorful photos in there. Perfect. All right, that looks pretty fancy, actually. So now, one of the other benefits of using a stack is where Abir is asking, where's my name? All right, I'll get to you in a second. One of the other benefits is, we've got some elements here. And let's say I wanted to edit what Bruce is saying. And let's go ahead and just say something. I absolutely love using Adobe XD and watching. Now watch what's going to happen when I get to the end of this particular text layer, right? Watching. Did you notice? It pushed the ones below it down. Which is wonderful. Repeat Grid doesn't do that at the moment. Hopefully one day it might, but at the moment it doesn't do that. So using a stack will allow you to do that. And if you wanted to maybe add some additional content, or I can dive in here and just add some line breaks, and it's going to automatically push that stuff down. So I know some people in the chat feel left out. So we've got Abir and we've got Timothy. I can't include everyone. Did I spell that right? Yes, I did. Okay. So let's go ahead and just add some information. Let's add one more, and this is going to be me. Comic Sans is the best typeface, ever. There we go. True story. So I'm going to grab the Howard toy face, move that in there, and maybe I'll just move myself up a little bit. Another benefit of using a stack. And maybe Val came in here, right? Y'all know Voodoo Val. I think we need to ban Howard, right? And of course, the purple toy face is going to be perfect for Val. I'll move that up a little bit. And then maybe, in this location here, this is probably where I got banned, possibly. Anahita saying, no, not Comic Sans again. I'm sorry. Cody got removed. Oh no. Boop. Cody, there we go. But green. And we'll do one of these, just so that Timothy is different than Abir. Perfect. So I'm going to duplicate the Howard one, drag this down here. I've already been banned at this point, right? So this might be totally not Howard. And I do have this other toy face that I slightly modified with some of the other ones. And this is totally not Howard. So it's definitely not, right? No, not me. So I'm going to put that in there, and then right? Totally not Howard is not very happy right now with Val banning me. I can just shift these around and, there we go. All right. So at this point, we have a few additional items to add in, right? We need a chat box. Where is totally not Howard going to type his messages? So down at the bottom, what we need is, let me go ahead and just collapse this for a second. I'm going to grab one of these lines and just paste it down here, just to break this chat. And then right about here, we might want that chat box. So I'm going to grab the rectangle, drag one out. We'll round out the corners a little bit. Set this to a nice dark color. Set the border right about there. Perfect. And then on the left-hand side, something like join the conversation. Now, that's obviously way too big. It's probably also too heavy too, so I'm going to drop that to about regular 12, possibly? Probably not though. Let's try 14. Left align it. That's still too small. 16. It's a little bit better. And then over to the right, there's a little tiny happy face emoji. Will you be hosting the April Creative Challenge? I don't believe so. Actually, I will not be. I do know who's hosting, and you're gonna have a lot of fun. It's gonna be a good time. Let's see if there's a smile. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, which one? Ooh, boy. There are some options. Not a lot of options, but there are options. The little winky guy looks pretty cool. All right. Boop. Close. Let's go for 16, and this side's about 16 too much. 16 might be too squishy. Let's try 24. There we go. This one, I mean, we could leave it at 16 there, but we'll just keep it at around 24. It is not Andrea this time. I don't know if it's been announced yet, but I'm sure you all can find out. There is a way to find out. But it is not Andrea, but you're going to have a lot of fun with whoever's hosting April's challenge. All right, so we have our chat box at the bottom, which I'm going to group and call this chat box. It's probably not what it's actually called. There we go. And, maybe we want some additional chat messages and the ability to scroll, right? So I'm going to move these up a little bit, and let's add a few more. Duplicate, and this will be, let's see, who else do we have? We have Emma in here from Uganda. Great to see you from Uganda, Emma. I'm going to add in another toy face. Let's go for this one. Nice gold toy face. And I'm just going to actually type what she just said. Enjoying from Uganda, Africa. There we go. And we'll do one more. Now you can't see this right now, right? And we're going to get to that in a moment. Let's actually move this above the chat box just so I can see what we're dealing with. And we've got Megan. It was announced. Oh, okay. And Megan might be saying something like the Toronto Maple Leafs are the best hockey team in the world. I would imagine Megan is fuming right now. And I'll drag that one in there. That's probably the color of her face as she's angry at that comment. I believe she's an Oilers fan. Okay, so it was announced as Brandon. Yes, Brandon is hosting and is going to be a ton of fun because Brandon is Brandon, right? Brandon is one of the best hosts that I've seen. I would say he's a lot more energetic and exciting than I am. All right. Sorry, Megan. All right, so we have these chat messages and we might want to enable scrolling now. And of course, we have these other elements like the join the conversation thing at the bottom and this area up here. So there might be like a chat message up here. There might be some down there. I'll just duplicate a few more just so we have a few, right? So what we're going to do is with this group selected, I'm going to enable a scroll group, a vertical scroll group in the Properties Inspector. And it's going to give me these two little handles, one at the top and one at the bottom. And in this case, I'll want to drag this one so that it's more or less flush with this break up here. And then this one right down here. And it's going to mask everything else out. So think of it like a mask, right? We have the content inside of this little window that we just defined with these handles, and everything else outside of it is going to be masked. But what's nice is without wiring everything up, it's going to be obtainable. That's probably not the word, but you're going to be able to accessible upon scroll. So if I go ahead and press the play button at the top, I can now scroll through these messages, right? Now you're going to notice also it's going right to the edge, and that's because we have the content set right to the edge, right? And we have those handles. What we can do now is dive into the scroll group, which I'm going to name chat, and select the entire messages group, and then we can enable some padding. So padding is enabled right now, but because there's not a defined background layer, it's just set to 0. But what we can do is go to all padding, and then maybe the top will add, let's say 24 pixels, and the bottom, which is the third one, will add 24 pixels as well. So now if we press play again, and we scroll in either direction, we now have a nice amount of padding at the top and at the bottom, right? So we now have an interactive chat pod that we can scroll through. And of course, if we did have some more time, we can turn this menu into a component so that you can click on any of those and a little thing would pop up. But even though we have a scroll group, we can still dive in here, make changes, and I can just add a few lines, something like that, and the rest of the messages move down and that padding is maintained, right? So you can continue scrolling. All right, so that is going to wrap it up for today's masterclass. A big thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Kyle T. Webster's coming up in just a few moments. Next week, we are off on Friday, so there will be no masterclass, but I'll definitely be back the week after that. And April's coming up. Who knows what we have planned in April? Maybe something. You never know. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you all next time. My button's not working.